Hello there, men, and welcome to the Masculinism Movement channel, a place for men to be empowered in their masculinity in an anti-male age. I'm your host, Brian Crawl, and today I'm going to be mansplaining to you more about the Mafia and what it means exactly to be a Mafioso or Mafiosi. With Chapter 2 of my book, The Italian-American Mafia, A Socio-Political Perspective, by Brian Crawl. Membership structure and initiation rite. Cosa Nostra is structured with an official hierarchy based upon the military, as it is a paramilitary organization that is meant to function as a second government. The Mafia hierarchy is as follows. Firstly, or actually, I'm going to list this one as number 0 since it no longer exists, but originally at the very top was the Capo di tutti capi, which meant boss of bosses. This top boss, who presided over all of the heads of the other families, was actually only a temporary position, as it was found to have too much power, and thus it was later dispatched and replaced by what I'm now listing as number 1, the Commission, which is made up of the heads of the 5 families in New York, along with a couple of other families' bosses, such as Chicago and New Jersey, together as a ruling body. And then the second in the hierarchy are individual bosses, called dons or godfathers. These are the heads of their own families, like the president of a company. And under them, number 3 is the underboss, which is the second in command, or a street boss, or acting boss when the boss is in jail, like a vice president. Number 4 is the consigliere, which means counselor in Italian. It is an advisor, a consultant, or a mediator, or a mentor who gives advice to the bosses and is called in for counseling whenever necessary, just as how corporations will hire consultants for special matters. And then the 5th tier is the capo regimes, shortened to capos, which means captains or lieutenants, also sometimes called skippers. These are the heads of smaller crews that are a subsect of the larger family. Under that, number 6 are the individual families or crews. These smaller gangs function together as an operating body to carry out their gangland operations. Every larger family will have several or more smaller crews operating within it, each having a handful or more members. And then under that, number 7 are the individual members, more formally called soldiers or soldato in Italian, or more commonly buttons, made guys, wise guys, or just friends. These are the gangsters that make up the gangs themselves. In addition to the next tier, number 8, the associates, connected guys, proposed members, hired guns, and other affiliated non-members, such as the vast network of other gangsters of non-Italian descent that will associate with the Mafia. And then lastly, number 9 are the people under their control. These are often civilians who are being exploited and extorted, told they have a debt to pay, and get coerced into providing resources and help to the mob. That is the total structure of the Italian-American Mafia. You may have noticed how 2 of the categories don't refer to individuals, but groups of individuals, the Commission and the crews. This is because together as a group, these individuals form a new body that has its own function and is much greater than the sum of its parts. This is where the strength of a paramilitary organization comes from, and how they're able to undertake large operations, just like a corporation or a branch of government. In addition to being a paramilitary organization, the Mafia is also a pyramid scheme, like multi-level marketing or network marketing, but one that is exclusively for Italian gangsters. The associates must be making money for the family before they can be considered for membership. All members have weekly membership dues called a vig, which is a term for a weekly interest on a debt that they must kick up to their bosses. The soldiers then kick up a vig to their capos. The capos kick up to the underboss, who then kicks up to the boss. In return for all of this, everyone gets to operate under the umbrella corporation that is Cosa Nostra, and reap the rewards of its many resources, from giving them work to do to offering them protection and many other perks. With there being multiple different large mafia families around the country, each with a myriad of different crews and gangs operating within it, altogether the Mafia has thousands of members who have been inducted into official membership. There are also tens of thousands of associates who are at the Cosa Nostra's behest, as they try to prove themselves in hopes of potentially becoming members. Not to mention all of the affiliates who also work for the Mafia but aren't Italian, so they will have to remain at the lowest tier for life. Only pure-blood Italian lineages that can be traced back to the old country can be officially made members of the Mafia. At its peak in the USA, the Mafia had about 6,000 formally made members and around 60,000 operating associates. And the other mafias of Italy also had numbers approaching that. So all in all, when the numbers were the highest, there were hundreds of thousands of mafiosi and mobsters operating in the most vast and impressive criminal network that the world has ever seen. It's no wonder that they were so powerful and able to function like second governments. However, luckily for us in the US, times have changed, and this once great criminal network has been largely depleted. Today, the Mafia in America only has a fraction of the numbers that it used to. But of course, we are just one country, whereas across the ocean in Italy, the Mafia has been continuously thriving for at least a few hundred years or more. And from this third world wellspring of criminal life where the economy and corruption keep getting worse and worse, converting more and more citizens to the criminal way of life, Italy has such an overabundance of mafiosi that it is always exporting them overseas to other countries in a steady stream, just like any hot commodity. So the overall global members of the Mafia always seem to stay totaled somewhere in the hundreds of thousands, and its vast criminal empire never wanes overall, even though it may do so in one single location like the US. As stated, associates aren't officially part of a family until they are made into members through a secret ceremony. For this to happen, someone must be an adult male of Italian descent. It used to be that you had to be 100% pure-blooded, both your parents had to be Italian, and the mob bosses needed to know your parents' last names and trace your lineage back to the old country. Then, after the Mafia had been in the US for a few generations, there were too many made guys who were falling for non-Italian broads. Maybe they found them to be easier going than Italian girls who were known to be standoffish and a bit bitchy. Or maybe Italian girls were just in shorter supply here, and there were too many other options to choose from. Either way, I can't say for sure. Sometime in the 80s, the rules changed, so it was just your father who had to be of Italian descent, and the boss had to trace his heritage back to Italy. This is why when someone like John Gotti married a woman who was a Russian Jew, not even Catholic, then his kids still became made in spite of not having pure Italian blood. Eventually, though, even this stopped being a hard and fast rule, and later on, around the turn of the century, the Mafia lost its ethnic purity, and thus its solidarity. This is probably one of the major reasons for its downfall. To become a member, someone couldn't just come to the family and get made into one. They first must be an associate for quite some time, and that could be a very long time. For the membership books aren't always open to making new members. On the contrary, they're usually closed, and can remain that way for decades at a time. Remember, this is supposed to be a super exclusive secret society, so there was a long, drawn-out, and difficult process to get in. Usually associates start quite young and are often grade school dropouts who have gotten mixed up with gangs instead. Often, associates spend decades building their relationships with Mafia members, because in order to become a member themselves, they must have known another member for at least a decade or more, who will then propose them for membership. In that time, the associate must prove their loyalty and benefit to the family by doing work for them which will generate significant income, and take care of some dirty business. Murder. Once they've proven themselves as assets to the family, when the books are finally opened up, they can have their names submitted for membership, if their mafiosi friend proposes them, and they have another additional sponsor. As you can see, you need a lot of street credit in order to become a part of the Mafia. That is how they make sure that only the best of the best street guys who are the real deal gangsters become made. One does not sign up to join the Mafia like you would another club or organization where you just have to pay a sign-up cost and you're in. One must be brought in and officiated into it by the powers that be. The commission will decide when it is time for the books to be opened to new members again, when it sees that too many of its members have died or gone to jail, or in rare cases, retired. And then the bosses will tell each of their captains to bring them some names of members they'd like to propose. Usually just one per captain. You see, when someone is proposed, it can't be done by just any other member. It must only be done by a captain. The captains do not need to then go out recruiting because there will have been multiple street guys who will have been trying to prove themselves and become part of the crew for years. Some of them may already be functioning as part of the crew in many ways, having done a lot of work together with them. So the captain then takes the name of the guy he wants to induct into his crew over to the boss of the family for a meeting to see if the guy will be approved. This boss will then vet the individual. He will of course make sure of his Italian heritage. He will inquire to the captain how the associate has proven themselves, what kind of work they have done for the family, what businesses are they involved in, how do they make their money, and how much are they bringing in for the family, and perhaps most importantly, have they committed any killings for the family. If there is an associate who is bringing in cash and shown that he's capable of defending Cosa Nostra's interests with acts of violence, but he has not done a hit job yet, the boss will assign him one as a test to prove his loyalty so that he can be initiated. This is called making their bones, and it is important to do because the first tier of actual membership is being a soldier, or in other words, a hitman or button man, a job which, as the title says, requires you to do more killing anytime a boss presses an execute button on someone. So making your bones allows you to get your button, which is another term for becoming made, since you then become a button man. Once an associate has proven himself through bringing in good money as well as killing an enemy of the family, if the boss approves him for membership, that still is not the end of the entire approval process. Then the boss will hold a meeting of all of his captains and will submit the names of each prospect so they can be voted in or out. That way, each captain has a chance to hear the proposed names, who they are being sponsored by, and will have a chance to object and speak out if they have any problems with the guys or any reason why they shouldn't be allowed in. If any captains do have any beefs with the proposed members, this will be their chance to have a say and either vote no to him becoming made into the family, or in some cases, squash the beef with the other captains and give him a chance. If the captains vote to induct him into the family, then there will be another meeting with the inductees in which they formally make them into made men. For this induction ceremony, each associate will be summoned to the meeting and told to dress formally in a black suit and tie with a white shirt, like they were going to a funeral. They will meet in someone's home with all the captains and bosses of the family, as well as all of the inductees who are being made, usually several. The bosses and captains will all be together in one main room where the ceremony takes place, while the inductees all wait together in a separate waiting room until they are each called in to meet with the bosses and get initiated, which is done one at a time. In the room where the ceremony takes place, there will be a candle, gun, dagger, and a picture of a saint on a table. It's all very official and religious, you see. The initiates will be asked if they vow to put the family above all else, even their biological family members. They are asked if they will always come whenever called by their boss, even if their mother is on her deathbed. Assuming that they make this vow, they wouldn't be there if the answer wasn't yes, the ceremony will proceed. The initiate will then be asked if they are willing to kill for the family. With the answer being yes, because they should have already, they are asked what finger they would pull the trigger with. That finger is then pricked with the dagger, and blood is drawn. The boss will have a picture of a saint on a card, like a baseball card, but for Catholic zealots. He will take the new member's finger and wipe the blood on the picture of the saint. The initiate will then be asked if they are willing to die for the family. And when the answer yes is given, the saint card is lit on fire and held in the hands or juggled back and forth by the inductee. While tossing the burning saint back and forth between his hands, he is asked to repeat the following words. May my soul burn in hell for all eternity, like this saint, if I ever betray my family. Or something almost exactly like that. This process is very painful, and the other members will be looking on to see if the initiate can endure this pain, as Mafiosi need to be strong enough to endure serious pain. They make a vow of omerta, which means silence and secrecy, that they will never reveal anything about the family to non-members, including associates, under penalty of death. Basically, it's like signing a verbal NDA, except more strict, because they aren't supposed to even speak the name of the Mafia openly or reveal that it even exists at all. If asked point blank by any outsider, they are supposed to deny its existence completely, no matter who the person is. The Code of Omerta is an important key to the way of the mob culture. In fact, many rules stem from it. The initiate is then assigned a godfather to mentor him, usually the captain who proposed him, who will then become his immediate boss. The captain is charged with teaching him the rules and ways of the life. To be his godfather means to be his guide. Back in the day, the inductee's godfather was decided by having everyone in the room put up their hand with a random number of fingers extended. Then the boss would count all the fingers in total, and then use that number to count out the members of the room in a circular fashion until he got to the total number. And the member he was pointing at then would be assigned to the new inductee as his godfather. However, that system of randomness must have come to be seen as flawed, because later they changed it so that the proposing captain was the one assigned this important role. Probably because since he was proposing him, he will have already taken the guy under his wing. As per the Code of Omerta, the initiate is told that he cannot reveal to anyone that he is a member of the family, unless another member, whom he knows for absolute sure is a made member, introduces them to each other as friends of ours. Anytime a family member introduces someone to him as amico nostro, or friend of ours, he can take that as an assurance that they are a part of the family, and they should be given the respect they deserve as members. However, if there is someone who claims to be a member of the family without being vouched for like this by another member who he knows is one, this guy cannot be trusted to be who he says he is, at least not until a verified made guy introduces them as such. So, even if you suspected or thought you knew or did actually know that someone is a made man, without another known made guy introducing him to you as such, you still cannot speak to him as a member and reveal family business until that formal third-party introduction is made. This formality is because the Mafia is a secret society, so the Code of Omerta must be followed with extreme strictness in order to protect the family from outsiders who may not have its best interest in mind, like the many moles who are constantly trying to infiltrate it. The initiate is then told that their past life is dead, that they are now reborn into the family as a member of it, and that they are to bring no problems from their past into the family with them. At that moment, all issues from their past with anyone else are all gone and must be forgotten. So they can't say to themselves, well, now that I'm a big hotshot made Mafia member, I'd like to use my new status to go and get back at someone who used to bully me. Absolutely not. That is not one of the reasons why guys should be getting made. The family is only concerned with what happens to its members while they are actual members. So old beefs must die along with their old life. And only if someone starts shit with them while they are a member can they use their status as such to exert force over them. And not by declaring it and saying something stupid like you'd see in the movies, like, hey, you motherfucker, don't you know who I am? I'm a made member of the Mafia. Because that would violate the Code of Omerta. The initiate is instructed that if he ever has any problems with anyone, including other made members, that he should come to his captain about it, and that it will get taken care of right away. For they have their own special procedures for dealing with beefs, you see, and the initiates are assured that they can rely upon their godfather for protection and anything else that they need, that they can trust in him, just like a father. Finally, with the induction rite complete, the new members are introduced to each other as mutual friends of ours. The ceremony then transitions into a celebration among these new members who will have drinks and cigars together and socialize in a way they couldn't before. The bosses will also tell them things about the Mafia that they have never been able to, such as what the other families are and who is in it that they need to know of. And also, very importantly, they are taught the rules of the Mafia, which is what I'll be going over in the next chapter. It all seems very formal and official, doesn't it? Well, it is not so official that there haven't been some variations across the last century or so and the many different places around the world where these ceremonies have occurred. The ceremony has differed a bit from era to era and family to family, with even larger differences if you were to trace it back to its ancient Sicilian roots. But the essential components are the same everywhere. That is what makes it an official Cosa Nostra induction, so that a member in America who is on the same level as a member in Italy or anywhere else can speak together as members, knowing for certain that they are part of the same thing. The initiation ceremony is in a sense a religious/spiritual ritual, regardless of where or who is practicing it, because no matter what other variables may differ, the bloodletting and anointing of and burning of the saint is what is called in occult studies sympathetic magic. So it is worthy of note here that the nature of this ceremony technically qualifies the Mafia as a cult in the eyes of some religious scholars such as myself. Also, non-Catholic Christians often consider these kinds of spiritual practices to be technically a form of what they call black magic, which I can't necessarily disagree with from an academic perspective. At the very least, I'd say that even if it isn't officially black magic, since that's not what they are intending to practice, that it is a religious ritual, for it involves both Catholic, occult, and violent death symbology, and it involves a couple practices that are traditionally seen as magical in nature, as well as a pseudo-spiritual vow. Also, the ceremony certainly has a dark, macabre spiritual nature and is certainly something that is very spiritually sacred, symbolic, and significant to the members who partake in it. So, for all of these reasons, I do consider the Mafia to be at least somewhat of a cult, or you might say a culty organization. The notion that the Mafia is a cult can be furthered by the report from one higher-up Mafiosi, underboss Salvatore Gravano, that during his initiation rite, the boss told the initiates that he is now their god, that they must have no god higher than him, and the god of their Catholicism must now come second to him. That if he calls them in, that they must come even if their own parent or child is on their deathbed and about to die. They must leave them and come into the boss. And if the boss orders them, they must kill anyone, even their own family members. So the spiritual significance of this covenant that the initiates are taking is not only profound, but religious. This ritual is even more spiritually important to them than marriage, even though both are a part of their religion. In fact, it is probably the most important and meaningful to them of any rite of passage they ever go through, seconded only by their funeral. For with this initiation, they have become bound to a new life, one in which they fully intend to live and die by the gun. Some of them even look forward to being able to kill with relative impunity. And there are even some mafiosi who look forward to dying like a gangster, being gunned down in the street, rather than succumbing to illness of old age. The people who come into this life have a certain mindset that most people do not have, and that is what makes them gangsters. In fact, most of these people cannot find work or be a part of normal society due to this mindset and the corresponding mental illnesses that they might be diagnosed with if they were to see a psychologist today. These mafiosi have Italian heritage, and Italy is a country known for narcissism. So many of them have personality disorders, such as NPD, narcissistic personality disorder, BPD, borderline personality disorder, or ASPD, antisocial personality disorder, which means being sociopathic or psychopathic. If they do not have a personality disorder, they most often have some other form of mental illness that simply renders them incapable of living a normal life. This would be part genetic, but part environmental, and due to them having grown up in impoverished slums where life is extremely hard and it is a struggle to survive, and they most often were bullied and suffered tremendous physical abuse as children. These factors are all what make these guys so aggressive and turn to the gang life. They have personalities that are wired through both nature and nurture with a tendency towards violence. But this book is more of a sociological piece than a psychological one, so I won't be taking a deep dive into the mental health of the mobster here. So now let's move on to go over what the rules are in Cosa Nostra to keep these aggressive gangsters from constant infighting. And that is the end of the chapter of my book, The Italian-American Mafia, Socio-Political Perspective. And I am going to be doing more readings from the book, but not very many. I'm not going to be reading even most of it. I'm only going to be reading a small fraction of it. If you want to read the whole thing, you're going to have to get your own copy at the link below, which is on sale now for a special sale price that won't last long. So be sure to check it out using that link below. It is sure to give you the intellectual stimulation that you crave. If you have any questions, you can comment below, and otherwise, take care of yourselves, men, because no woman out there is going to.